Hey guys, in this video today I want to talk about the ACT persuasive essay. We're going to walk through a model. I'm going to sort of point out some things that need to happen, things you need to include. This is a real basic model, and there are other things that we'll talk about throughout the term. This is a good starting point, things that we want to start getting better at. You'll see basically all the elements of it here. So, oops, sorry. There's the topic, which is these bans on certain kinds of food. They're asking you to take a position either way, one way or the other, yes or no. Actually, in an ACT essay, they will give you a third option. We're going to try to avoid the third option, and I'll explain that later on in the course. But it gives you some clues as to what reasons you might use in the for or the against. Some consider this to be a responsible step toward public safety. It would reduce obesity. Okay, so there's one possibility that you could include as a supporting argument. Others believe such laws to be ineffective and intrusive. Okay, it's real vague, but there's some idea of what you might do. You might have a couple of arguments about it not working, about it being intrusive in a government. In fact, that's what I've chosen to do here. So for the position paper that I've chosen to write based on this prompt, remember you have a choice. You can go either for the proposal or against the proposal. I'm going to go against it. And these are the three reasons that I came up with. Actually, hang on, that might be in a later slide. Okay, we'll see the three reasons after I read the intro. Here's the introduction that I came up with. Freedom to choose what we do with our lives is a key American ideal, and it's worked well for a long time. Our government's role is to protect that freedom, not to force upon us what they think is good. So unless there's something dangerous hidden in the food, banning it is not the government's job. We all know what's in soft drinks, and we have a right to drink as much as we want. Besides, there are always ways around silly bans like these. Okay, so this particular introduction paragraph contains a few things, but these are constants, things you want to do in each of these essays. Number one, it has context. What that means is that it doesn't jump right off the bat and begin with the topic. If you read the first sentence, freedom to choose what we do with our lives is a key American ideal. It's worked well for a long time. Our government's role is to protect that freedom, not to force upon us what they think is good. Actually, the first two sentences. We don't know what the topic is based on those two sentences, and that's the idea of context. The idea is that you want to lead the reader into the topic. Rather than jump right out and say, no, this shouldn't happen. We want to lead the reader in. So we pick a broad idea. In this case, I chose the idea of freedom. It's an American thing. We all like freedom. Our government is there to protect our freedom. Now, from that context, I can then move on to what the topic actually is, which is the ban. The government's banning something in food and soft drinks, which is the rest of the paragraph. Does something else. The topic is very clear. It's about soft drinks, banning the soft drinks, and the reasons that we're going to use to argue it are hinted at it. Or I've hinted at them. We all know what's in soft drinks, and we have a right to drink as much as we want. Besides, there are always ways around silly bans like these. So we have a few things going on. One, the government is not, it's not the government's job to do this sort of a ban. Individuals know what's going on. They can make their own decisions. And third, it might just be ineffective. It may not work. So as I approach the argument, I've got three little arguments, right? So an ACT essay, you're trying to argue for one big proposal or against one big proposal. That was our prompt, whether or not to ban these soft drinks. In order to do that, you're going to want to have several little arguments to build up. Think about it. If you're asking your parents for something, it's always better to give them a few good solid reasons to do something rather than just one. You know, if you're asking for the keys to the car on a particular night, you can point out three different things that suggest that it'd be smart for them or okay for them to give you the keys to the car, right? You guys know how to argue, so a big argument is usually made up of smaller ones. That's all we've done here. We have a clear position on the topic too. It's obvious from this paragraph that I'm against bans on soda. Okay, so those three things. Context, we want to know what the topic is, and a clear position on the topic. Okay, so those are the three things that we arrived at. Or that in my head, as I write this essay, these are the three things that I'm going to hit. Which means this is how my body is going to be organized. The body is the argument part of the paper. It's not the introduction, it's not the conclusion, it's whatever you do in the middle that actually does the arguing. So I'm going to have 3 paragraphs. I've got 3 good reasons that I could talk about, which means I'm going to have 3 body paragraphs. That's a good general rule of thumb in this kind of an essay. Shoot for 3. 2 tends to be a little bit too small, not quite enough argumentation. 4 is fine if you got a solid 4th argument. We're going to talk about a possibility for doing a 4th paragraph that deals with dealing with an opposing argument. So you take the opposition's best argument and show how it's bad. We'll talk about that later, though. I want to keep it simple for today. So 3 body paragraphs because I've got 3 ideas. 3 smaller arguments. Okay, so that's what's going to be like if we go back. Look at the very first word here. It's the word first. Right? That's a transition term. It's leading you into the body. You know that if you see the word first, I'm giving you the first argument. Here I'm just using a whole sentence to do it. It's because they're not me. Let me read that again. And there's a good reason why things backfire so often for the government. It's because they're not me. Not that I would make better decisions for the whole country. I wouldn't. But I can make smart decisions for me. When the individual is in charge of behavior, like how much pop to drink, the individual bears the consequences of that decision, both good and bad. Okay, there's my second reason. The individual can make decisions better than the government can. Here's our third reason, and there's a little transition term there, finally. So you run into that word, you know, here's their last point. Even if such bans do go into effect, we'll just ignore them and do what we should have been doing in the first place, make our own decision. If the ban is for drinks of 16 ounces or bigger, we'll just order 2 or 3 or 4. Restaurants, in order to please their customers, will offer free refills. And there will be a new market for cups that are 15.9 ounces. It's ridiculous to think that consumers won't drink as much pop as they want to. We'll find a way. Okay, so the 4th paragraph develops the 3rd supporting argument. So this is the last of our body paragraphs. That such bans simply won't work. Okay, the last paragraph in an essay like this is the concluding paragraph. Here it is. Dictating behavior just doesn't work. Governments are too far removed from the situation and can't possibly know what's best for us. And even if they did, our decisions don't belong to them. Their only job is to protect that freedom, not to take it from us. Okay? Concluding paragraph. The 5th paragraph concludes the essay. It sums up your arguments and leaves the reader with some last thoughtful words about the topic. Notice also the last sentence. What word do we see here and in the first sentence? Their only job is to protect that freedom, not to take it from us. Now, you can't see that first paragraph, but maybe you remember that one of those words showed up in the first paragraph also. It's the word freedom. So if you're reading this thing through without some voice talking about it as you're doing it, you just read it from beginning to end, you would catch the idea that freedom shows up at the very beginning and at the very end. And that's called framing the essay. Okay, it's just a way of sort of tying things up. It's like putting a bow around the whole thing, and it can be done very simply. A single word can do it. A phrase can do it. You generally want to avoid repeating an entire sentence. That just gets to seem sort of contrived, like it's just a trick you're trying to stick into your essay to make it sound good. Stick to a word or a phrase, and it needs to be a memorable one. Freedom, that's a powerful word. That's an easy one to remember. So that works well to frame the entire thing. Okay, so there is sort of a breakdown of what an ACT essay looks like. If you need to rewatch this as many times as you need to, go right ahead, because you're going to do some work over the weekend. I need you to rewrite your gender-separated classrooms essay and include the following. So some of you are going to be starting from scratch. You might be able to salvage a paragraph here or some ideas, but you're basically going to need to be starting over. You need 5 paragraphs. I want you to shoot for 5 for this one. Give me an intro paragraph, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. Now, I don't have a problem with you going back and looking at what I just wrote for this fake prompt as kind of a model. Imitation is a great way to learn this kind of writing. So if you want to imitate it, that's okay. I'd say that essay I wrote was an average essay. I probably, had I had more time to do it, I would have added more detail. But but just as sort of a basic model, I wanted to keep it fairly simple. So you can start with that. I'd build on a little bit if you're going to do that. Transitions between big ideas, words like first, next, finally, or even better, if you can have a sentence that moves the reader from one idea to the next, that's a better transition. So include transitions between the big ideas. Context, so at the beginning, lead your reader into the topic. Don't jump right in and say yes or no or this thing needs to happen. Try to pick a big, broad idea that you can talk about a little bit that would make sense to then jump to the topic. And then framing. Take a shot at framing it. A lot of these things are going to take practice. Doing good context takes a lot of practice. Framing, getting a sense of what words work as a good frame and what don't, that takes practice. But I want you to take a shot at it. Pick a memorable word from your intro, preferably from early on in your intro. It doesn't have to be from the first sentence, but you do want to make that frame the last sentence. So whatever you've got, some memorable word from your intro, include it somehow in the last sentence. You can even build this backwards. If you've got you really like your conclusion and you think you've ended it well, we'll start there. Look at your conclusion and try to find a good word that you could build back into the intro. There's nothing wrong with doing it that way. Okay. This is not going to be a handwritten essay. The only other time we're going to do a handwritten essay will be the last day of class when I have you do an in-class final assessment. So for this one, email it to me at that email address. It's also on your syllabus that I gave you in class. Do it as an attachment. If the program is WordPad or some other notepad type program, I may have a problem opening it. So you can attach it, but also paste it into the email if you can. Okay, if you have any questions, email me back, and I'll get back with you. So that's it. Have a great weekend, guys. Bye-bye.